Hi everyone, and welcome to The Climate of Sport with me, Claire Poole, the podcast where we explore how the world of sport can drive climate action, champion equality and shape a more sustainable future. From the boardroom to the locker room, from grassroots to global stages, the game is changing and so are we. Let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome back to The Climate of Sport podcast with me, Claire Poole. I hope you are having a lovely week. For those in the Northern Hemisphere, you're enjoying your summer. For those in the Southern Hemisphere, I hope you're staying warm. It's brilliant to be back with you and talk about a few stories this week. The first one is a bit of a longer thought piece and then some other news elements. So the first story of the Climate Hat Trick I want to chat to you about this week is around artificial intelligence. So are sport organisations repeating the fossil fuel sponsorship playbook now with AI, either accidentally or on purpose? Okay, so AI, it's everywhere. I think we can all agree that. People have very different thoughts about it. I've been in so many conversations recently where colleagues are talking about it all the time. Friends are as well. Like a lot of my friends who are employed by larger organizations are saying they're spending a lot of time training AI in terms of their role and their job and finding efficiencies from the organization. A lot of friends of mine who run their own businesses are using it to be more efficient. I was at a family barbecue at the weekend where one of the kids is at uni and they're having to use AI as part of a module of their course. And if they didn't do that, they would have failed the module. So while she didn't want to actually do it because she's doing a creative course, it was part of the module that she had to. So a lot of stuff going on. And then in these conversations broadly about AI, I think people seem to fall into a couple of camps and then there's sort of a third element as well. So I think there's people who are leaning into AI with gusto. They're very open, they're hyping it up, or they are showing what its potential is. They're sharing the benefits, they're sharing modeling and elements that can help. And they're really, really leaning into it with gusto. That's kind of one camp. Then you've got the people who are running away from it, people who are perhaps worried about where this is going to end. You know, whether we are literally training artificial intelligence and in a few years' time, our jobs will be defunct. A lot of conversations about why can't we train AI to do the minutiae or benefit us in some way. It seems to be used for a lot of creative elements that is very much around humankind. So looking at different ways of using it for efficiency or for fun, lots of different things and concerns around that as well. So those who are running away from it. And then there's ones who feel either way, they either love it or they hate it, or what they have in common is that they're being forced to use it because of their employee or their university course, as I mentioned. So whatever their feelings are, they're having to use it either, and that's exciting, or they're not really happy with it, but they're having to use it. Then there's the headlines. AI recently escaped its sandbox, and a couple of times the prompt of what the AI model was being asked to do meant that it couldn't achieve it inside the framework of where it was supposed to operate. So it got out of that to reach its goal. Experts emphasized around that, saying it's escaped. It doesn't mean it's sentient. Do you feel like that's a bit yet at the end? So a lot of conversations about its consciousness and how that's going to evolve. So also recently AI solved a mathematical equation that people thought was impossible. It hasn't been solved for over 100 years. AI has done that. AI photos and videos that even media outlets are being fooled by and are being reposted and reshared. And then they turn out to be a very, very good AI of people or individuals. Also sharing of voices and videos. A lot of ways that AI is hitting the headlines. So one of the ways it's hitting the headlines, which is what I want to chat to you about today, is when it comes to the connection with fossil fuels. So I was reading the Heated newsletter, which is another great newsletter, great resource if you're interested in the broader climate change conversations. It isn't sport related, but it does look at a lot of wider themes around the climate crisis. That highlighted that the AI boom has rapidly increased society's appetite for fossil fuels because of the electricity consumption of data centers. So obviously we know a lot of data centers are being set up in different parts of the world because to run these AI models and the amount we're using it, the huge data centers with huge cooling towers, etc., need to be there to manage all of this activity. And data center electricity consumption, they've reported, has sent technology companies emissions soaring and knocks their climate plans wildly off course. pulling them directly into the fossil fuel business. So as organizations, as tech companies are thinking about the potential of AI and the demand for AI, where they may have had quite strong climate goals, the inference here is that because they are supporting the demand of AI, they're having to build data centers, they're having to run them, they need electricity, maybe their green energy isn't enough to supply that, so then they're using more fossil fuels. They said in the newsletter, that's just the tip of the AI climate iceberg, because what they raised around some recent research is that it's also helping the biggest oil companies in the world produce fossil fuels more quickly, cheaper, and for greater profit by helping them locate new deposits more efficiently, helping them to drill wells faster, and extract more from existing fields. So essentially, the rise of AI is supercharging oil and gas exploration and then also getting that oil and gas out of the ground. So this new peer review study, co-written by a former Microsoft employee, shows that the emissions enabled by the fossil fuels industry of AI are likely far greater than the emissions of powering AI as a whole. So what they're saying there, we're very focused on the data centers, the electricity consumption, the water consumption of actually just using AI, whether that's to create a photo of your friend looking weird in some situation they've not been in, or drilling for oil. So we're very focused on the actual operational emissions of AI. And what they're saying here is that AI is enabling the fossil fuel industry in terms of making it more efficient and effective. And those emissions, in terms of the more oil and gas that's being pulled out of the ground, are going to be greater than powering AI as a whole. Their study said that big oil's use of AI to produce more oil and gas could create 3.3 to 13.3 times more climate pollution than powering AI's data centers. That means those carbon emissions, they said, are anywhere between Mexico's annual emissions on the low end and Russia's on the high end. And we're talking about those countries for a whole year in terms of emissions. And this is where sport comes in, because Holly, who was one of the study authors, told Heated, it's difficult and frustrating for us to see the conversation around the true climate impact of AI just stop at operational emissions. We cannot get across enough how important it is to include what AI is used for. So what has this got to do with sport? Well, what it's got to do with sport is sponsorship, how AI is now showing up in sport sponsorship. Some examples: Chelsea Football Club, a Premier League football club, is a principal partner of IFS that started last year. They proudly highlight as the first industrial AI partner of a European top-flight football club. I spoke on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about Premier League shirt sponsors shifting as gambling sponsor bans come into effect. So software and technology have started to fill that gap, and Crystal Palace have got an AI sponsor called Temporal, and Fulham sponsor SBOTOP is not AI, but it's AI adjacent. It helps support AI. Then in September 2024, Sport Business Journal cited that Sponsor United counts 126 AI brands using sponsorship or advertising within North American sports. As you can expect, cutting-edge technology and efficiency go hand in hand. So it's no surprise that Formula One is really leaning in to AI. In May 2026, it was reported that in just the past 6 months, 8 new AI partnerships have been signed across Formula One and its 11 teams. And the rapid rise is highlighted in other sports as well. So generative AI software organization Harvey has secured 10 sport sponsorships in just 9 weeks. Paris Saint-Germain, Fulham, Stuttgart, the Cubs, the Rangers, the Mavericks, the US Open, the Warriors, the Valkyries, and the Liberty. Those 10 sport sponsorships in just 9 weeks. So why is AI taking over sport sponsorship? For the same reason other industries have in the past, whether it was technology or tobacco or consumer goods. It's basically brand familiarity over feature parity. So I spoke in the previous podcast when we were looking at the shirt sponsorship of Premier League of kind of what sorts of sponsorship have taken hold over the years. And what we've seen broadly is a bit of a move from business to consumer products. You know, in the sort of 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was very much the likes of what we see in Olympic sport now, you know, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, stuff that basically consumers are buying day to day, and the advertising is in that sense. We've seen this move to the likes of fossil fuels, where people don't choose which fossil fuel to buy. They're going to buy whatever is at the pump that's the right price and the nearest location to them. They're not trying to create customers with that. It's about brand familiarity. And we're seeing the same now with AI. AI companies want to use sport, of course, to normalize and build trust and familiarity around their rapidly expanding energy intensive technology. So a lot of people won't be using these brands that are being used as sponsorship. A lot of us are familiar with ChatGPT, with Claude, some of the ones that are used for people more just doing something more locally. These are big systems that are used for large organizations. So it's not necessarily about building consumers necessarily. It's more about building familiarity and trust. This shift is happening. We're starting to see it more. So there's a lot of questions I think that we should be starting to think about when it comes to this. If AI companies are using sport to normalize and build this trust and familiarity, if they do so without disclosing or addressing the emissions associated with that growth, AI could quite easily be the new climate controversial sponsorship category, depending on which software organizations and what it's used for. So I thought just some questions to ponder that you might be interested to think about, and also to be more aware of where you're seeing this pop up. Some questions I thought about is, should sport organizations be asking more questions of potential sponsors that are AI organizations that they would ask of a conventional technology company? For example, what is this AI enabling? So again, if you look at more conventional technology companies, it's fairly straightforward. There's a bigger question around AI in terms of who they're partnering with and what that AI is enabling. Does sport have a responsibility when it helps normalize a technology whose societal consequences are still being worked out? Again, it's very early stage. We don't know where this is going, and again, it's different to things that have come before where we can't really guess exactly where it's going to end up. We could guess that AI is going to become more a part of our society. We could guess it will make things more efficient and effective, but we could also guess that it will mean a lot of jobs will be lost going forward because of that. A lot of people could guess that it might adversely affect our society when it gets to a stage where we're highly reliant on it, etc. So again, is there a responsibility for sport to think about who they're working with and what sort of technology they're normalizing? Is AI washing the next concern? Is this, greenwashing, sports washing? Is AI washing the next concern that we need to be thinking about? And AI is a huge and growing category, so there isn't a blanket position on this. So it isn't really enough to ask whether an AI sponsor is sustainable. We need to ask what its AI is actually enabling. So lots of things to think about. It's a nascent area. I think, given the feedback from Heated and this study that's out about not just the operational impact, but then the wider reach of what this AI might be enabling in terms of emissions, are interesting things to think about when it comes to sponsorship and sports role, which is a really important role, as we know, in terms of people having that trust and familiarity with their chosen sports organization. That sport, as referenced by some of these companies, taking up 10 sponsorships with all different sports in 9 weeks. This is a big area that they would see that trust and familiarity being borne out. Is there more we should be thinking about around this? So lots of questions, not that many answers, but lots of questions hopefully to ponder. Our second climate hat-trick story is around Montblanc. So Montblanc refuges, I'm sure you saw, were closed in another climate impact on sport. So we've been through, in the UK, the 5th heat wave. Droughts, wildfires are hugely impactful summer here in the Northern Hemisphere when it comes to the climate crisis and extreme weather. And we've seen massive impacts on sport. So as well as the adaptations we're now pretty much getting used to of hydration breaks and match times being shifted and training being moved to a cooler part of the day, cooling techniques being used, etc. Those adaptations are becoming quite ubiquitous now. But we've started to see some of the impacts when these heat waves and these droughts go on for longer and more sustained periods of time, like football seasons being pushed back, the potential temporary closure of swimming pools to make sure there is enough water for the population, etc. Another impact we're seeing that, if you're not a mountaineer, you may not have seen coming, is the close of refuges on Mont Blanc due to the drought in Europe, creating an unacceptably dangerous rockfall situation. So again, common sense, it's not that difficult to draw the line between the lack of water, the very dry summer we've had in terms of on mountains, especially at altitude, is causing clay, soil and sediments packed into fractures to shrink and to shift. So those cracks widen, they destabilize, and then they're more prone to collapse. So these rock falls are now becoming what the stewards of Montblanc call an unacceptably dangerous situation. We're right in the middle of peak climbing season in Europe, but the extreme heat and resulting drought has caused climbing to be unsafe. You can't just close a mountain. It's not as easy as closing a venue. So there's many ingress and egress points for people to get onto Mont Blanc. But by closing the refuges, the authorities were very clear that in doing that, it was intended to deter climbers from trying to summit by the Gouter route. This is when you're getting to the very top level of the mountain, the very avid mountaineers who are trying to get up there, the climbers. So that is a big climate impact in terms of impact on our landscapes again, you know, how our landscapes are shifting in a way that you may not have thought about when it comes to the climate crisis. And then also how authorities can go so far to deter people, but they can't ban people, they can't physically stop people in this kind of outdoor landscape where people are going to make decisions for themselves. And there was an example of that quite soon after this happened. 34 alpinists were already on the route when the order came into effect. They decided to ignore the advice of local guides, the local guides told them because of this notification and because of the advice, they needed to descend the mountain. They decided to carry on and they stayed overnight at the Gouter refuge. They stayed overnight there. The next morning, they obviously had time to reflect and thought, no, we will go down. But what they did is they asked to be airlifted out. So the mayor of Saint-Gervais, Jean-Marc Pellier, refused. He said they had chosen to take the risk and could get the airlift down if they wanted an airlift at their own expense, not the expense of the public's, or they could probably slowly and safely make their own way down. Turned out some of the group that were up there, the 32 alpinists were there, chose both. Some made their own way down safely, others chose to get airlifted out at their own expense. But again, this raises another question around sport, exercise, recreation in our natural landscapes. When guidance is in place and human beings decide to take risks at their own, at their own risk, whose responsibility is it to make sure they're safe? Because people have to be responsible for their own safety. And in a lot of cases, whether, we could see other examples of this with areas of wildfires or drought, if people are trekking, there can be guidance that's given by authorities, but people are going to do what they want. And I wonder if going forward, this is another area we're going to see climate impacts on sport and recreation have economic impacts as well, because people are going to ignore advice, put themselves in situations and then ask to be rescued. The mayor of Saint-Gervais, Jean-Marc Pellier, also, since this is called for reform of the French mountain rescue rules, saying that public resources, which we all know are very limited at the moment, should be reserved for genuine emergencies and those that take calculated risks, especially if it's against guidance, should bear the consequences of that risk. It's a common sense approach. There's a part of us all that thinks if a human being is in danger, you would do everything you can to save them. But obviously, when you're using the public purse to do that, and we go into a deeper climate crisis, and those funds, those resources are needed elsewhere for people who maybe have genuine emergencies, decisions are going to have to be made. So I think this is something we're probably going to see more of as our landscapes become more fragile because of the climate crisis. And we as human beings who've been used to a climate that is more stable think that it's okay to carry on when it's not. I've done this before. This was fine before. I have previous experience. And I think we're seeing that level playing field shift now. And I think we're going to see consequences because of it. Okay, our last climate hat trick story of the day is back to South Korea, just because we've followed this story a little bit. In South Korea, because of the extreme heat there, a number of baseball matches were cancelled for the first time under heat rules in previous weeks. Now we're seeing, not in baseball, but in football, the South Korea Pro Footballers Association calling for transition to the fall-spring schedule to protect players from the worsening climate crisis and punishing summer heat as local temperatures reached record highs. this August. So as we said, we've seen climate adaptations in South Korea already. Now the next step, the Players Association is calling for a more wide-scale shift underpinned by the climate crisis, but also serving to maintain the league's leadership within Asia and global competitiveness, because their current February to December calendar is out of alignment with, say, the leagues in Europe. So that's another element to move in. And as a reminder, the J League in Japan, they have already made this move. They've just started their new schedule starting in August for the first time. So they've moved again from the previous calendar to an August to May calendar, now in line with Europe. South Korea, actually not the league itself, but the Players Association, the Footballers Association, asking for the same shift. Interestingly, the J League made that decision in terms of the global competitiveness and probably their goals going forward in terms of competing at a global level by moving into the same window. Things like transfer windows, alignment with World Cups, etc., is easier for the calendar, because that's who FIFA would look at in terms of the breaks in the calendar and the pauses of national leagues. So J League have said it's more to do with global competitiveness, but also in Japan, we have seen the extreme heat having fatal consequences in some sports already, and a lot of adaptations happening. So now we're seeing the same in Korea. But interestingly, the move or the request to move is coming from the Footballers Association, and it's mainly about protecting players from the worsening climate crisis and punishing summer heat. South Korea's winter could actually be a challenge to this shift. So in their winter, December to February, they deal with a lot of sub-zero temperatures and snowfall. But again, the Footballers Association set a short pause around matches, acknowledging that that's likely to be the case. The quote from the president of the Footballers Association said players agreed that enjoying a break during the winter can better help them avoid injuries and maintain better physical form than having to play through multiple competitions under the scorching summer sun. So the president, Lee Kun-ho, saying the footballers have obviously agreed inside the association that taking a break in the winter to avoid injuries is much more preferable than playing through the heat of the summer. So 3 different climate hat-trick stories this week. The first one around the rise of AI sponsorship in sport and questions we need to consider when it comes to that and what the impacts might be in the future. The second one, the Montblanc refuges closed in yet another climate impact on sport, and perhaps an unexpected one for some people. And the last one, the South Korea players want the K-League season to change due to the worsening climate. That's the climate hat-trick for this week. I hope you've enjoyed these stories. I hope it's illuminated some of your thinking in our global movement. We are now just 7 weeks out from Sport Positive Summit in collaboration with UN, Climate and IOC, taking place on 6th, 7th of October. Just a little shameless plug. The speakers we're bringing together are incredible. This is going to be the largest, most inclusive, most accessible summit we've ever hosted. It's going to be translated simultaneously in real time into 10 languages, which you can see more about online. And there's going to be live agenda content, hearing from speakers, discussion, networking on every time zone globally. So no travel, no accommodation, no carbon footprint for getting involved, or very minimal carbon footprint for getting involved. And we want you to be part of this sea change. I think we've worked incredibly hard to do something different. We want to show that we can do things differently. It doesn't have to be business as usual. Nothing beats being together in person, but we'll be back in person next year. But hopefully when we come back in person next year, we'll have a larger global community. We'll have more awareness from hearing stories from all over the world and making our global community even more robust and even more together when it comes to the collective action needed from sport to tackle some of the challenges ahead. So we really hope you'll be part of it. Discounts are available both for group bookings, and also we have speaker and partner discounts as well. Please take a look, get involved. We want you there. It's going to be fantastic, but we want all the right people to be there. So if you've never attended a Sport Positive Summit before, this one's for you. You are never going to get a better chance to connect with the global community in this area without having to travel, without having to use your budget for travel and accommodation. You're going to be able to do it in your local time zone, from home or from the office. If English is not your first language and you prefer to speak and engage in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Brazilian Portuguese, in Mandarin, in Japanese, in Korean, in German, in Arabic, I think that's it. That might be all the languages we've got, but we are catering for you. So you don't need to speak English at the level of fluency to engage with us this year. So I hope you'll join us. I'm really looking forward to it. We'll share more information in the coming weeks, but thank you for joining us on the Climate of Sport podcast this week. And I look forward to chatting to you again next week. Have a great one. That is a wrap on this episode of the Climate of Sport. If this got you thinking, send it to the group chat, send it to your team or someone who cares about the future of the game. Follow, subscribe, and join us next time, because the biggest wins aren't just on the scoreboard, they're out there for the planet too. See you on the next one.